Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Nice to have you once again.
Yeah,
It's always a pleasure when I have you.
don't worry.
So today we're going to talk about Ghana's IMF bailout. Of course, this is an ongoing development, and until we secure this bailout, we're going to talk about it. But there's a new twist to it, and the new twist is that Ghana's, bailout approval is pending external financing assurance. So what we understand is that from the last meeting, the IMF and the World Bank Group spring meeting in Washington D.C. in USA, we understand that Ghana, for now, on her part, has met all the requirements. What is left for us to secure this bailout is for our external creditors to give us that financial assurance. And if this is good news, what does it mean for us? And that's why we have an economist to help us understand this issue, because the government says that they need this bailout to make sure that there's some cushioning in our current situation with regards to the economy. And that's why we want to understand this. If the ordinary Ghanaian should be happy that it's going to happen anytime soon, because we also know that our are also giving the assurances with Ghana meeting China and the Paris Club. There seem to be some appears to be some good news coming from it. Doc, this is the IMF deal again. Should the ordinary Ghanaian be happy with the current state of affairs with regards to the negotiation process and how things are going?
Well, good morning once again.
Good morning.
To your viewers. We are here to speak for the country, not just for these generations, but the generations to come.
Exactly.
IMF, we are here because of two major reasons. One, we have a fiscal deficit of about 61 billion. A revenue projection of about 143 billion and our expenditure projection of about 200. So the difference is 61 billion correctly. And last year was 44 billion. So, and then when we check our debt to GDP ratio, about 105%. So we will need support from the International Monetary Fund to address particularly the imbalances associated with our balance of payment. Say, IMF is here with us, and this is not the first time we are talking about the IMF. In 1966, our first IMF bailout under Joseph Ankara, we went for about $36,400. 67, we went for $25,000. 68, we went for about $12,000. Then Ankara was replaced by Afrifa. Afrifa went for about $5,000. And then by 72, Professor Buzia came in to inherit Afrifa's IMF engagement. And we all know that Ignatius Achampo came in to replace the Progress Party under Professor Buzia. Ignatius Achampo refused the IMF program just as Nkrumah did for a reason. And then under Ignatius Achampo, we were talking about let's feed ourselves, Operation Feed Yourself. And if you want to bring it to the layman language, that is Operation Feed Yourself for you. But in economic terms, we are talking about domestication, industrializing the economy, using the Malaysian powers, the Indonesian powers, the Singaporean, powers, or the Korean powers, the Chinese powers, now the Indian powers. Those were the things Achampo was looking at. And Achampo lived with it for quite some time. And the Americans, the establishment of the International Monetary Fund, connived with Akufo to overthrow Achampo. Akufo went for $53,000 from the IMF. Now, between Akufo's regime and Afrifa's regime, we have 9 years intervals.
Okay.
And within those regimes, we were talking about Operation Feed Yourself. Let's produce what we eat and eat what we produce. And the rest, we export it for foreign earnings to support the city. 9-year interval. under Rawlings regime. How much did we go? We went for about $1.6 million. Under President Kufuor's regime, about $184,500. Under President Mo's regime, about $387,000. Under President Mahama, $918 million. Now President Akufo-Addo, $3 billion. But the underlying question is that if you remove the Achampon between Afrifa and Achampon, which is the 9-year interval, up to Kwesi Akufo, 9-year interval, the remaining ones, every 3.5 years, you see Ghana at the IMF. So in other words, after every 3 years, we have to go back to the IMF.
So if you have to follow that pattern, if you have to follow that pattern, it means that even if you secure this one after 3 years,
we will go back. We will go back unless we get leaders who think without the box, not necessarily thinking outside the box. Those who think without the IMF box. IMF is a non-starter. Let's think of declaring IMF a persona non grata. IMF cannot help the problem of Africa, just as the other parameters do not help the progress of Africa during the slave trade era. To colonization and up to date, we are still suffering. Unemployment, poverty, diseases all over the place. This morning I was watching one of your sister stations. 2 young guys into Galamsey were killed. Why were they killed? They were there to look for livelihood, look for money to, cater for their family members and themselves. Now they found themselves in the grave because of useless IMF deregulation policies. They tell you now, some say that we shouldn't blame the IMF. Now, about your question, your initial question, whether there is hope under this current engagement, we have no choice. It has become a necessary evil. But as to whether this government will secure the $3 billion is also another question. Because we are talking about external creditors giving us assurance. See, not just assurance from the external creditors. There are so many other parameters. For instance, we have to, increase our revenue. And I learned they have passed some three bills in addition to some other one making 4 or so or 5 or so. And then we have been told that let's hoodwink the GET fund, the Disassembly Common Fund, and the other, Road Fund and others onto the GIFMIS program. Yes, GIFMIS is one of the most remarkable development within the Oracle sector. It was developed by Oracle. So you cannot authorize expenditure at through East Assembly without the consent of the finance minister. So there's that kind of accountability when it comes to the usage of the GIFMIS. So the white man is telling us that let's lend sense and hoodwink these payment schemes onto the GIFMIS platform. The white man is also telling us that COVID-19, when COVID came, Ghana received about 35 billion. We told the finance minister to account to us. He came and mentioned just 19.3 billion or so. So the remaining amount, where is it? Now the white man through the IMF is telling us that, look, go and do a comprehensive, accounting and publish it. They are all part of the requirement to meet the IMF. And then the debt sustainability aspect. Before I move there, I
wanted to also find out, you talk about how you gave us a history of Ghana's relationship with IMF over the period. What does IMF gain from supporting countries like Ghana? Because we know that in this one, countries that are in critical condition that need an IMF bailout include Sri Lanka, Zambia, Ghana. So what does IMF gain in supporting these countries?
When the Europeans met at Berlin in 1844 to parcel up the African continent, the then leader for Belgium, I don't want to mention his name because of his brutal killing in the Congo. I don't like mentioning his name. He wrote to the various missionaries that, see, the continent is full of people who understand God. They know God. Don't go and teach them God. Go and teach them religion. So religion became a proxy to colonize Africa. Just as they did in the slave trade era. Today, after the World War II, in 1944, the Americans and the Europeans and other countries, developed countries they call themselves, came together and said, let's form an international monetary standard, which they call the Bretton Woods institutions. There are two, the World Bank and then the IMF. so that the IMF, for one, will be helping countries with balance of payment challenges. Now, while we, the individual countries, create the artificial problems for the developing countries, they will run to the IMF. When they come, give them conditions to follow. Conditions like deregulation. Now, let's say that we produce beer here, and Europeans also produce beer. Let's say from Germany.
Yeah.
The German government, in collaboration with the IMF, they will tell the IMF that let Ghana deregulate its beer industry. Absence of tariff, absence of non-tariff, absence of subsidies to the local manufacturers, among others. These things will not allow the local beer producer in Ghana to compete with the cheap good or the cheap beer from Germany. You see the economics of it. So IMF is just there as a body established to champion neo-colonialism. So when Kwame Nkrumah said that let's look at, uniting, not necessarily bonding countries together, uniting for purpose, like we are seeing in Asia right now. Russia, China, Japan, India. Asians are beginning to understand Kwame Nkrumah's theory of unity. That unity has to be established. If that unity is established, we can conquer the IMF. It's not only about conquering the IMF. It's about understanding that the IMF is not there for Africa. They are not there for us. They are there for Europeans. Indeed, it was actually formed before we gained political independence. In 1944-45. Ghana gained independence in 1957. So can we rely on that organization?
But that's what we've been relying on over the period.
Yes, so we must get leaders who think without the IMF box. It's a useless box. It is the reason for those two guys they killed yesterday at the Galamsey site. The poverty that they have. See, somebody said we should not blame the IMF, that we should blame our leaders. And I told one elder on one of your sister platforms that, look, if I'm a humanizer, and you bring a virgin woman into my room and lock her up, and you expect me to control myself, you are a liar. I won't control myself. IMF has become a necessary evil. People don't want to speak about it because they want appointment in those organizations. But you see, Pan-Africanism is a choice. You take it to speak the truth. And the truth is that IMF will never help Ghana. 65 years after independence, IMF has not been able to help us.
But why do we blame Ghana? I think I would have to agree with whoever made that point, that we should blame our leaders. IMF is just there. They don't force us to come to them. We feel our situation gets worse.
They created the system in such a way that we have no other option than to go to them.
When you mismanage your economy and then you have to come
to them.
Not
mismanaging our economy. Let us not take the argument from that perspective. The foundation of the IMF must be looked at. And the member state, the blocks, the 190 countries, the major financiers, the policies they have in Africa, the directions of those policies. So IMF has leaders from Africa. They have various departments, they have technocrats from Africa. So while we blame the incompetence of our leaders, let's also blame the incompetence of the leadership of the IMF. See, development economists like Atta Lewis came out boldly to speak the truth that IMF has never helped Africa. And there's the need for the leadership of the fund to relook at decisions, particularly with the issue of deregulation, outright capitalism. Capitalism is a choice, and capitalism itself has always failed. The Obamacare, the Ghana health insurance, the many social interventions we have had in recent time should tell us the market inefficiencies.